Hey, Richard Bryce here, Tennis Hacker. In this video, I want to show you one of my favorite vision assessments and training exercises for tennis players. Hopefully you find the video helpful. If you do, be awesome if you give me a thumbs up. Also much appreciated if you could subscribe to my channel as well. So the assessment looks at a couple of different things. Firstly, it looks at something called visual suppression. Now, in order to see accurately with 3D vision, which is what you need to judge distance and depth and to be able to track the ball effectively or as optimally as possible, you need to use both eyes together. But in some people, the brain isn't able to process the image from both of the eyes together, and it prioritizes one of the eyes. And that's something called visual suppression. So we're going to be assessing for that. But the other thing we're going to be assessing is eye alignment. Are your eyes actually pointing at the target in the way that you think? Because a lot of people, they think they're looking at a target, but their eyes are actually focusing either before or behind the target. And when this is happening, obviously this is also going to affect your ability to judge distance and judge depth and read the flight of the ball. So it's going to create difficulties for your timing and everything else you do. So the assessment is going to look very strange, but you're going to need a bit of string and you're going to tie it to your racket like this. Mine has also got a bead on it, and that can be really helpful, but you can just do it with a bit of string and just use the knot. But then what we're going to do is we're going to hold the racket out in front of us at arm's length. I'm going to wrap the string around my finger like this. I'm going to hold that to the bridge of my nose. And then what I'm going to do is look at the bead and I should see two strings going directly into the center of the bead, because each of my eyes are effectively camera lenses. So as I look at something that's directly in front, because each eye is seeing a string, I should see two strings going directly into the center of the bead. If you've got any visual suppression, instead of seeing two strings, you might only see one string because your brain might not be processing the image from that eye. You could potentially also see a faded string. So if it's completely suppressed, you'll only see one string. If it's a little bit suppressed, it might be faded. So one string will be really bright, the other string will be really faded. And some people get a situation where it appears and disappears. So the string will keep on switching back and forth, and you can see the one on the right, and then you can see the one on the left, and then on the one on the right. And some people can see most of a string and then a little bit's faded. So there's a few different options of what can happen. But anything other than two really clear strings is a problem. It indicates an element of visual suppression. The second part to the assessment is, do the strings cross directly in the center of the bead? They should cross directly in the center of the bead, but some people, the string crosses a little bit before or a little bit after the bead. If that's happening, it means that your eyes aren't quite pointing at the target in the way that you think. So that's going to be the basic assessment. Hold the racket at arm's length, look at the bead or look at the knot that's tied on the racket, and there should be two equally bright strings going directly into the center of the bead. Anything else, we've got a problem. For the next level of assessment, we're going to start to move the racket into different positions and to move our head in different positions. So basic assessment is holding it directly out in front, and then you can try kind of moving it to the side and see if that changes anything. Are you still able to see two strings? Move it to the other side. Can you still see two strings? What about if you move it down? What about if you move it up? Are you able to draw a small circle, still being able to see two strings and still having your eyes line up? So you can change the assessment just by moving the racket around. Obviously, if you go too far, your nose will get in the way, but if you keep the movements fairly small, we should be able to see two strings going directly into the center of the bead. And this is a slightly more advanced assessment, but it's also a training exercise. So you can just literally set a timer for a minute and just kind of work through different directions, just focusing on that bead, and it helps to keep your brain using the image effectively. It trains the eye muscles, it trains different parts of the brain that are responsible for processing information. So more advanced assessment, but also very effective training exercise. The next thing we can do from there is to add in head movements, because obviously when we move our eyes into different positions, that can affect the way our brain processes things. But actually when we move our head into different positions, that can also affect things. Partly because of the balance system in the inner ear, that starts to take control over the way our eyes move. But there's also a connection between the joints in our neck and the muscles and the way things move and between our eyes. So some people are okay when they're like this, but if they turn their head to the side, then they start to have issues. So I would test that. I would turn my head to the left and see if you're still able to see both strings. I might change hands, but I'll turn my head to the right, see if I can still see both strings. Do the same thing going up, the same thing going down, moving in different directions. So I'm going to do 8 different directions, so all the points of the compass and all of these different positions. Am I still able to see 2 strings going directly into the center of the bead? And again, that turns into a training exercise. I can do repetitions in each of those directions, or I can just set a timer focusing on the center of the bead. This trains the visual system to use the image from both eyes as you're moving, as your head's moving. So it's very kind of specific and applicable to the type of visual processing that you need to do when you're playing tennis. The final level of specificity that we can add to these assessments are we can set up in tennis specific positions. So I might want to work on my forehand, so I'm going to set up in a neutral stance. I'm going to get things so that I've got my contact point, and now we're kind of challenging things in a different way. So my head is going to be rotated into a certain position, my eyes are going to be in a certain position, but now I've also got additional physical load, which is obviously what happens when you play. So in this position, I can now test, is there any level of visual suppression? And I can do those same movements, and I can actually move my head into different positions and see if it affects things, and use this as a training exercise. I could set up in an open stance and do exactly the same thing, and I can obviously do the same thing on my backhand, using it as both an assessment to make sure there isn't any suppression and that the eye alignment is okay, and then using it as a training exercise to switch things back on and to train parts of the brain that are responsible for visual processing. Okay, so there's a few different progressions that you can work on. I understand that they look very strange, but it's a really effective assessment and training exercise. A lot of players have issues with visual suppression and eye alignment. I used to be one of them, and it really affected me and prevented me from developing my game when I was younger until I learned how to fix it. I've also worked with hundreds of other players who have these sorts of issues, so it's a really important type of exercise to work on. Now, if you'd like to learn more about using brain-based training to improve your tennis, I've got a free class that's going to go into a lot more detail about it, so I'll place a link to that class down in the description so that you can check it out if you're interested. If you have any questions about this exercise and what I've gone through today, maybe how to apply it or anything else, if you leave those down in the comment section, I'll try and get back to you as quick as I can. Otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you next time.